Welcome to That's a Rep. I'm so excited for today's episode. We are here with the co-founder and CEO of Forte, Vineet, and we're going to hear some of his story. And he's done a lot of crazy stuff out there, from being in the Marines to going to Cambridge and Stanford, and there's just a lot that we get to talk about. So you've done a lot of hard things in very different arenas, as I've already said. We want to understand how that shaped your view of mental fitness. So if you can start off by kind of establishing some of your background story. I mean, take us back to why the Marines.
Yeah, totally. Well, thanks for having me here, John, and I'm really excited to be here and share my story a bit. I think it starts before even the Marines. I came to U.S. when I was 5 from India and grew up on the East Coast in a blue-collar family. And in high school, I wrestled, I played football, and I ran track. I really went to school mostly for the sport part of it than anything else. I was a 16-year-old senior when 9/11 happened, and if you're like me, it changed your life forever. Mm-hmm. I knew that things weren't right in the world, and I wanted to contribute in my own way, and I thought the idea that was a really good one was try to join the Marines. To my shock, the Marines don't let 16-year-old boys enlist in the service, even if you're in a time of war.
Okay.
And in that process of waiting and trying to figure out what to do and talking to my parents and praying through all those things, I got a full ride to go to school and become an officer a few years later. But why the Marines? I think the reality is that I'm an all-in or all-out kind of personality. There's no in-between for me. And as I thought about serving our country, I wanted to be part of a force that kind of was at the front lines. And to me, that was the Marine Corps. And so it really attracted personas like myself. And I was really excited to be able to contribute in that way and in that service. And I learned a lot about myself and what serving means in that organization.
I can imagine. And that's not something a normal 16-year-old would say, yeah, I want to jump into the Marines. And it kind of shows your mentality all the way back then of wanting to serve and help. I'm curious, though, what surprised you most about yourself in those early years? At what point did you realize, success isn't just about these physical sports things or maybe even technical and in the books things? What are some things that you learned and what surprised you most?
Yeah, I mean, there's a lot of lessons I got out of the Marine Corps. I mean, it's a great leadership program, if I'm being honest. I don't think anybody else thought that a skinny little kid would do so well in a very demanding kind of workforce like the Marine Corps. I had that little bit of story myself. I was surprised that actually that physical fitness, while it's a core competency and requirement, isn't what drives success in the Marine Corps. It's actually the mental component that drove success. And more specifically, I was an intel officer, so you take that up one more level because you're always analyzing and evaluating what could happen, what should happen, what didn't happen in real combat experiences or other places. I was surprised that actually that the training that I had before the Marine Corps and in the Marine Corps trained me really well to be able to perform at the highest levels when everything was on the line. So I think I was surprised by how well I was doing in the service, but I was also really surprised by the fact that despite not having all the answers, many of the answers, my teammates did. And that's one of the greatest lessons that I got out of the Marine Corps, that people who are regular people like you and I have, if we work together, have the answers for the problem at hand. And I learned over that decade of service that actually asking really good questions and helping others be the fullest version of themselves is honestly the best thing I could do as a leader.
It sounds like even way back then, mental fitness, even though the term hadn't been coined, was something that you were already experiencing and navigating through yourself, but also having opened your eyes to by the experience of others speaking into you and accountability and help within the Marines. And I'm curious if we can now shift into mental fitness. Why does that matter? And how did we get from the Marines teaching you that to where we are now with mental fitness and your idea behind that and really moving that that movement of mental fitness forward?
Yeah, so one of the crazy things that I tried to do in the Marine Corps was become a martial arts instructor. This is a pretty brutal course, man. It is a course where you get trained and certified to teach other Marines how to fight with a rifle or a pistol or a knife, we call it K-bar, any weapon. Actually, the motto of that instructor course was one mind, any weapon. And over weeks and months of getting beat up, candidly, you learn that actually the most powerful thing you have is your mind. It isn't your rifle or your pistol or your K-bar or whatever other tool you might have at your disposal. It's the mindset that helps you perform in ways that you never imagined. So what used to be a really hard thing in the beginning of that course became so normal. And that really changed even my own mind about what I was capable of doing and becoming. That mantra of one mind, any weapon really stuck with me. And it changed the way I looked at what I was capable of and others around me. And I took those lessons in the way I led my team in Iraq or Afghanistan or in places like the Pentagon, Capitol Hill, or in the UK. So when we come to mental fitness now, it's that idea that actually the thing that is so unique and powerful about us is not how much we can lift or how much emails that we can send or how many sales we can close. Those are important. The thing that's so important about us, the unique thing, is our mind, will, and emotions, because that's the nexus. That's the seed that, if properly developed and stewarded, can actually really provide tremendous impact and value, not only for ourselves and our family, but for the organizations that we work with. So mental fitness to me was the beginning of actually every other thing that we wanted for our own lives and for us collectively.
Yeah, and so you're talking about how mental fitness is relevant to us today and how you learn those things along the way. What would you say to a leader who misses it when their focus is only on outcomes and they're not focused on their people?
Yeah. So the reality is, as a leader myself, we all want things for our organization. We want performance and productivity and profit. Those are all really important things. Those are the outcomes that we want and need for our organizations to add more value to society and to continue to grow. But those are outcomes, and we want to think about who is driving or what is driving those outcomes. And performance and productivity and profit all are driven by people. There's a real person behind the sales call or the marketing channel, that sermon, that class lesson, that nonprofit kind of fundraising activity. All of those things is driven by a real human like you and I. That person is at the nexus and the driver of the performance, of the productivity, and of the profit. We want to be thinking about, how do we actually get that individual, that human, to be all that they know they are, all that you believe they are, and the person that showed up in your interview, right? At the end of the day, that person is both the greatest driver of your profit and the greatest driver of your competitive advantage in the marketplace. So mental fitness is really pushing on that part of the equation.
It reminds me a lot of what we talk about within Forte, of this idea of drift versus drive. And candidly, in my story, coming to Forte, I was in the midst of drift. I was 40 years old asking, what do I want to be when I grow up? Because I had been in ministry for so long, shifted into higher ed, and was like, this isn't what I need or want for my family. And I came to Forte, and immediately you started to talk to me about this idea of mental fitness and what it is to have drive and purpose. And it was like a lightning bolt moment for me of like, that's what I want. And I'm curious if you can define in your own words what drift is. I define it as, I was lost. I didn't know what I wanted to do or where to go. And I'm curious if you can define that for those that are listening.
Yeah. So drift is something that we all experience. There's not a human on this planet that doesn't experience drift. And so let me start with a metaphor first, because it might be helpful. If you think about swimming in the ocean as an example, you're at the beach, you're swimming, you want to go from point A to point B. Well, there is a current that's pulling or pushing against you. And you have to acknowledge that and still either swim against it or parallel or whatever the case might be. Drift is this kind of gravitational pull on all of us. And it manifests in different ways. For some of us, that drift might be, hey, we're drifting against the values that we held from our personal perspective. The person, the father or the husband or the mom or the wife you want to be, there might be drift there. You might show up differently to your spouse or your kids than the way you wanted to, the way you intended to. There might be drift in the way you do work. hey, I
Uh-huh.
have a plan for the CEO that I want to be, and then life happens, and I might,
Yep.
if not intentional, drift away from the kind of leader that I want to become to you, but to others. There's drift in my spiritual aspect of my life, right?
Uh-huh.
I know that the values that I hold near and dear, and am I living my life today intentionally according to those values? So drift can manifest in a myriad of ways. The reality is that drift is constant, and
Uh-huh.
it's a pull on our lives. It might be all aspects of our life or particular parts where we're most vulnerable. And so drift is there. Now, what are we drifting from? Well, we are located right now in this moment in time together, and we are trying to become someone in particular in a future ahead. And there's a path between here and there.
Uh-huh.
Drift is not that we're not going in a linear fashion. Most of life is not linear. We don't have to think about that
Uh-huh.
like that. But drift is when our azimuth, our direction of travel is actually not the way it ought to be. So drift is always pulling us away from the goal of who we want to become, and it manifests differently. So hopefully that makes it more clear about how drift can affect each of us individually on a daily
Yeah.
basis.
Yeah, definitely. I think that was a great way of putting it, and it applies to everybody. So on the opposite end, we talk about drift, we talk about drive. So what does drive actually look like in real life, in a meeting, in a sales call, in just a general decision? How do we use mental fitness to get to drive?
I think one of the key things that we don't do enough these days in these crazy, hectic, busy lives of ours is to say, well, where am I trying to go? We got to
Mm.
pause to do that. Or who am I trying to become? We got to pause to do that. So let's take a meeting like you just said, John. If I'm going to a meeting and I want to drive in that meeting, I need to understand what are the outcomes that I want for that meeting.
Yeah.
What's my role in making sure those outcomes become more likely to be achieved? And how can I participate and contribute others to help achieve that goal? Drifting is coming to a goal with no agenda, no pre-described outcomes. And we've been to
Yep.
those meetings before.
Mm-hmm.
We are guilty of that at Forte as well, is, hey, you come to a meeting, you're not really sure why we're having that meeting. You're not really sure who's leading it or what are the outcomes we want. And you're not even sure what the next steps are after the meeting. That's a simple
Yep.
example. But let's take a more tactical or a personal example. We can drift in the way we show up as parents, right? I know that I have 2 young kids, and this is one of the most precious seasons of their life and my life, that we're all
Yeah.
together in our messy little house, and I can be a more intentional father. I can drift pretty easily by just having my phone at the dinner table.
Yep.
And instead of having a conversation with my kids talking about what I might think is not that important, because I'm looking at my emails or Slack or doing whatever. That's not who I want to become, but it's very natural for me to do that if I'm being honest
Yep.
with myself. Driving is saying, hey, I know who I want to be when I come home, and I know that I'm vulnerable to letting my device, my phone, distract me. Let me actually go ahead and plan and say, I'm not going to have my phone in the living room or the dining table or put my phone off, whatever it means to me, to make sure that I actually drive in the way I want to show with my kids at dinner tonight. That's
Yeah.
an intentional practice that we can all do together.
And it reminds me again of some of what we talk about of proactive versus reactive. So drive is the proactive energy. It's making sure you're ready for the meeting, thinking about what you're doing in the moment, whereas when you have your phone next to you at the table, you're reacting to all of the beeps and notifications and everything. And
Totally.
so it really kind of goes back to, if you want drive, if you want to be sound and mentally fit, we truly believe that is built on 4 different pillars. And I would like to walk through those a little bit. One of those is flexibility. And we talk about how you need to be in the moment, be able to be proactive, not reactive, but also flexible. We talked a lot about that actually with Sandhya in our last episode, and what that means to be anchored in something and be able to move back and forth, to hold on to your values, but still be flexible enough to deal with life as it comes at you. Can you tell me about a moment where flexibility as a leader really mattered for you in your personal life?
Flexibility is required every single day. We all have had plans for every single day. Each of us have had plans, and life throws some kind of wrench at it. So it doesn't take a lot for all of us to consider what flexibility is required for yesterday and how we may or may not been as flexible as we wanted. For me, one of the stories that comes near and dear to me is I was a young lieutenant in Iraq, and I was an intelligence officer. We were interrogators, and we captured a guy that had killed a lot of Marines. And it was over 100 degrees. Everyone's exhausted after the patrol and all those things, and it was time to go and interrogate. My guys on my team are phenomenal Americans. I have the privilege of calling many of them friends, and it just gives me so much joy to remember those days with those guys. But at that moment, there was a lot of emotions about this guy that we captured. It took a lot of flexibility on my part and my team's part to be able to adjust the plan and actually show up in the way we know we needed to as professionals. And it could have been a lot easier to let the heat and the emotions and the lack of sleep and the intensity of what we just experienced manifest in ways that wouldn't have accomplished the mission the way we needed to. That's a weird experience that I'm talking about there. Most people won't experience that. But in that moment, I think back about flexibility there. I had to adjust. I had to have my team adjust. And everything about the natural way the world was moving at that moment was so much contrary to what we wanted to do, right? So let me talk about a practical experience here. Let's talk about flexibility in the normal corporate experience. You might be in a meeting, and the thing that I thought was going to go really well, this idea that I've been baking and I wanted to tell the team, well, the feedback that I got was actually, it was too much. Right? It was too much to digest for everybody at the moment. And so the next time I had a meeting, I had to show more flexibility and say, you know what? I have to adjust in what I communicate, in the duration of what I communicate, and the medium in which I communicate. So flexibility can be in the deserts of Iraq, but certainly can show up in just the way we handle a meeting and how we communicate to our teammates. Last thing I'll just say really quickly is I think leaders will experience this a lot. You might have members on your team that you're really excited about, and they're just really doing an amazing job. And then something happens to them that they have to take a pause at the company or the organization. I had that in the Marines. I have that here at Forte. Life shows up differently to all of us. You have to adjust your plan with real humans going through real lived experiences. It could be health. It could be having children. It could be retirement. It could be aging parents. But something's going to adjust their plan, which is going to adjust your plan. As leaders, we have to always adjust and be flexible to what our people are experiencing every single day.
Yeah, and I think a lot of that, as you were talking, the word awareness kept coming to mind. It starts with an awareness, to be mentally fit enough to be in the moment and aware of what's happening, and then flex and move as needed. And sometimes we can come into things so rigid and not be aware that our minds work that way, that we're affecting those around us. We're not flexible enough, and it impacts not just us and our perception that we give people, but everyone around us in that room, in that moment, in our families is impacted by that. So it's important to understand, what are my kids going through right now? Why are they reacting this way? What is my boss going through? What are my coworkers going through? All of that kind of stuff. And it also kind of ties into our next pillar, which is endurance, because a lot of the times we just assume like, well, people aren't doing what they're supposed to do, but we don't understand what's going on behind the scenes. And I know you have a story about being in the Marines and endurance and things with that as well. And I'm curious if you can tell us that story and then tell us what that moment taught you about limits and endurance.
Yeah, I actually have plenty of stories about my limits, even though I pretend like I don't have any. Back in Iraq, we were going on these patrols and operating, and, there's no schedule. There isn't like 8 to 3 you're doing this and 3 to 6 you're doing that. Well, unbeknownst to me, because of the adrenaline and because of my responsibilities, I hadn't really slept for a couple of days. And judgment is impaired when you don't sleep, for any human. And my second in command guy came up to me and he goes, "Hey, sir, when was the last time you slept?" And I could pause for a while. And I know that he already done the math at that point. And he said, "Hey, none of us have seen you sleep for a while. Why don't you go to sleep? and there's a perception that you want to give off as a leader is like, I got it. I can do it. I can carry the load. I can do all the things. And we want to be that kind of leader. But honestly, sometimes when we don't accept our own limitations, there's some huge risk that we put on our organization itself.
Yep.
So I asked my second in command guy to like, hey, I'm going to go to sleep for like an hour. Just wake me up an hour. I just need an hour. And he said, sure, no problem. Well, 8 hours later, he woke me up. My first reaction was to yell at him, right? And then my second reaction was to give him the biggest hug possible. This guy knew what I needed more than I knew myself, right? He recognized that if I was going to lead this team well for the next 6 months, it was early in our deployment, that I had to like not burn out. And that my ability to lead has to be based on the ability for me to be a human still, right?
Yep.
And he knew it because this was not his first combat tour, even though it was mine. And he did something so valuable for me. He reminded me that I needed the basic things like everybody else. I need to sleep, I need to eat, I need to drink water, I need all those things. So that's a story from Iraq. But let's talk about Forte for a second. When we started this thing, it was only a few of us back then. And I think 3 months into it, I started having some tremendous pain in my head, like on the right side of my face. And eventually I was talking to my sister-in-law who's a nurse, and she's like, hey, it sounds like you have this thing. You need to go to the urgent care facility. And she said, hey, how much pain are you in? I'm like, it hurts pretty good. So I go over there, and my wife comes with me to the urgent care facility, and the physician said, hey, how much stress are you under? And of course, as a Marine, I was like, not a lot. And my wife's like, oh, he's under a lot of stress. And the reality is that endurance requires us to understand the duration of the race. Right? The duration of most of our races that all of us, you and I are living as fathers or husbands or teammates at Forte, they're not sprints. They're more like marathons. But if we run the marathon like a sprint, we're going to hit that wall pretty early. Right? And I keep reminding myself, maybe less often now, hopefully, of how limited I am, and that the endurance that I need for this very long race requires me to live a different way, to lead a different way.
And as you were talking, it was dawning on me too. Endurance needs a partner. You need other people in your life. You can't do it on your own. And each of your stories, you had someone who was like, Vineet, you have to sleep. You had your wife in the emergency room saying, Vineet, you are stressed. And I think that that's really important. And it's part of, it's not one of our pillars, but it is core to who we are at Forte, is this idea of coaching. We want you to know, like, you're not alone, and you can talk to our Forte coaches. You can talk to your friends and let them know what's going on and how important that is. And it directly leads again to our next one, this idea of capacity. If we don't have endurance, we're going to drain our battery, and you need to be able to fill that battery, have the capacity to continue on. And I'm curious your thoughts on capacity and how you can actually increase your capacity to focus.
Yeah, let me just jump back to what you just said there, which is really important, which is, hey, this idea that you have to have humans alongside of you in this race of life, and it's a marathon, is really important. I don't want to skip over that. But there's two core things that need to happen. The first is, you got to be vulnerable and known by somebody. If you have superficial relationships with somebody, they're not going to be able to observe that you're kind of going down a direction or a path that isn't the best for you. Right? In my story in Iraq, that guy knew me. We spent a silly amount of time together, and he trusted me and I trusted him with our lives. There's a high level of trust. Obviously, my wife knows me. That's the first point, is that you have to have more than one, ideally, but many people who know you for the real messiness of you. Right? That's an important part of this race of life together. The second part is you have to invite them and give them the authority to be able to speak truth to you. Right? There's no shortage in our life in 2026 where we can hear the things that we want to hear about ourselves. But the reality is, somebody who you've invited, and this is maybe a very small circle of people in your life that actually know the fullness of who you are, and can speak authoritatively, that you've invited them to do that, to say, hey, John or Vineet, you're not making the decisions that are in alignment with your values that you said were true to you. Right? So those two things are really important. And that could be a Forte coach. But that also could be your neighbor, it could be your
Yep.
friend, it could be your brother, it could be your mom. It doesn't really matter. The more that you can build that kind of social connection with humans who really love and care for you and can actually kind of journey alongside of you in this journey of life, that's what's important. So I wanted to just highlight that.
Yeah,
That's a really
great.
important part of that. Now let's talk about capacity. I mean, we all want to increase the container of our life, right? The capacity that we can provide, right? So if we think about physical fitness and mental fitness, there's a lot of parallels there, right? We talked about flexibility. We talked about endurance. Think about capacity. The best thing I can think of is the marker in the physical fitness space is often like VO2 max, right? As a guy who's always trying to figure out how to increase my physical fitness, that's really important. Mental fitness, the capacity is really important too, right? And to be able to like broaden and deepen the container is something that doesn't happen overnight. If you think about the physical fitness space, you're not going to increase your endurance or your VO2 max or your flexibility overnight, right? It's consistency of training, intentional training that helps you do that. Same thing with capacity. So let me tell you an example of where I saw how little capacity that I had and how I could grow it over time. So when I got into Cambridge, it was a surprise to them as much as it was to me. And the first time I got there, the admission staff came and said, "Hey, look around. There's a very small select group of people, but many of you won't be here in the second year. You have to pass these very rigorous kind of essays and then the final kind of exam at the end of the first year. And based on that, you'll get to the second year." And I was scared out of my mind. I thought, gosh, I don't want to fail out of this program. And then I went to the library. I spent a lot of time at the Cambridge Library in those 2 years of my life, more time than I wanted. I remember sitting down the first time to write my essay. And I'll be honest, John, I couldn't really focus for more than 30 minutes without having to look at something else or get distracted, or it was just so hard to make this argument with all these books and consolidate my thinking. So I started literally thinking, okay, well, how do I just increase my capacity to focus? How do I just do that where I sit down and go from 15 minutes to 20, and then 20 to 30, and 30 to 40. And so I did the Pomodoro technique. I would like literally start a timer on my phone and say, I think I started with 20 minutes, like just do 20 minutes of hard cognitive work. And I gave myself a pretty big break, 10 minutes. Yeah. And I would just see how many of those kind of sets I could stack. And over the years, I went from doing 20 minutes and I eventually built up to 55 minutes and a 5-minute break. And I could stack those up to 8 hours a day. It was exhausting. But that's how I started to increase my capacity. It took a lot of work, but by the time I graduated, my ability to focus significantly increased. That's a silly example of how you can build your capacity, but you start small and you be intentional about how you just slowly kind of progressive overload. If you're in the physical fitness space, you know what that means. You can slowly start to stretch your container a bit more day by day, week by week.
Yeah. I think your example, though, hits on what capacity is. It's not innate. It's something that's trained. But it's also, I love that you built in times of rest. Because I think that's something that we disregard when we're thinking, I need to build capacity. I need to build endurance. I need to go, 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 go. How important maybe that 5 minutes every 55 minutes was for you. Because not only did it give you something to look forward to of, I can do this because I get 5 minutes of rest, but it also allowed your body and your mind to relax as well. So what were you going to say there?
That's really important, because actually what I didn't say in that is I would stack those times up and I would do silly things to help me kind of get, it was really hard, the cognitive work, but I would like treat myself. Like, okay, I know by the second hour, if I did 2 full hours, I'm going to get a cup of coffee from the library coffee shop. Yeah. And that was a 15-minute break. So after 2 hours, I got a 15-minute break and I got a coffee. And then during lunch, I would, instead of working on my thesis at the desk, I would say after lunch, I'm going to, there's a lot of gardens at Cambridge. I'd walk around the lake and do my kind of argument development while walking. And so that was, it was still focused work, but it was a different kind of, so there's lots of ways to build in the rest for your mind. And the reality is that every good athlete knows that resting is a core requirement if you want to see progress, right? distance runners run zone 2. Zone 2 is running as so freaking slow that it's so boring, but that's actually how you build your capacity for running 25, 30, 50, 100 miles.
Yeah.
And why is that important? It's not 100%. It's actually the opposite of that. It's actually training ourselves to run slower so that you can build a physical capacity to run longer. Mental fitness is no different. You can't be in 100% overdrive all day. It doesn't work. It's not even really possible, right? But the reality is that you can expand your capacity by just being intentional about how you're working, how you're thinking, how you are taking rest. And rest is a real part. Like, again, that phone is really amazing, but it actually zaps your energy in so many ways, even though you think you're resting. You're not.
Yep. Yeah, and I think, again, this ties directly into our next pillar. The story we tell ourselves is that I can keep going, I don't need to stop, or even my rest is watching a movie or getting on my phone, when the reality of that is that's not what rest is. And we talked about this with Richard in one of our earlier podcast episodes, which I highly recommend you go back and watch because it was a great conversation. But he talked about composition. And you've said kind of this is where you struggle the most. I'm curious why that is, if you can talk a little bit about that.
Yeah, so let's talk about the pillars one more time, right? We have flexibility, we have endurance, we have capacity, and we have composition. Everyone has opportunities to grow in all 4 of those dimensions. You're never going to arrive. Like in the physical fitness space, you're never done. Anybody who's trying to get into peak level of fitness knows that you have to continue to be growing and adjusting, and it's never done. That's true for mental fitness too. But for me, of the 4, this is the place that I have the most room for opportunity to grow. Composition is that story you tell yourself, the inner voice. And if I'm being honest, my inner voice was not great when I was younger. It was this very harsh kind of self-talk. And I have, over decades now, have kind of helped transition from that inner voice being so harsh to being maybe more realistic, more neutral almost. But there's a lot of work to be done there. So of the four pillars, this is where I think is the most room for opportunity for me to grow. Composition, the inner voice, determines so much of how we show up and how we feel about the moment that we're experiencing. So as a young kid, I didn't have a lot of confidence, and the world didn't really give me any reason to have a lot of confidence. Being a blue-collar immigrant kid, growing up in not so great of a well-resourced neighborhood, the inner voice wasn't great. It got a little better in college. It got a little better as I started experiencing some success in the Marines. It got a little bit better over the last several years, but there's lots of reasons why I still struggle there compared to the other 4 dimensions, or other 3 dimensions. The voice that we tell ourselves, the story we tell ourselves about us, about ourselves, the thing that we're experiencing, that traffic jam, that argument with your partner, the setback at work, the thing that we were praying for that didn't come to fruition, that is such a huge influence of how we live our life and experience it. And it is not linear, right? You can do things to train your composition, but it is, in my opinion, less linear than capacity, less linear than flexibility, less linear than endurance, right? The input to output relationship is not as strong.
Yeah.
So I struggle with this one the most. It's also the opportunity for the greatest impact in my life.
It's ironic that you struggle with that the most, because I've been with the company, I don't know how long, 6 months to 8 months now. And one of your greatest abilities in my life has been to speak into my life, and has been words of affirmation. I've realized I need that in my life, and you go out of your way to do that. So I think it's cool that maybe you've learned that about yourself, and you're picking up on how much people need that. And so you as a leader have implemented that into kind of the DNA of Forte. When we meet online on Tuesdays, that's some of the very first things you do is you will praise the employees. And I hope that you receive that as well from us as your employees and people who have experienced Forte. But I am curious, as we talk about all these ideas, these domains or pillars, whatever you want to call them, why not just leave it at a philosophy? Why not just say, these are really good ideas? Why build a company called Forte based on this idea?
Yeah. Well, first of all, I don't want to skip over the kind remarks. I've spent a lot of years working on the old Vineet would have shot away or pushed away your comments. The newer Vineet has been training himself to say, thank you. I received that. So thank you. Well, your question is a real question. Why not let this be a philosophy or a new thing or a random thing that we talk about and don't put into practice? Yeah. Well, John, you and I have kids. The world is a crazy place.
Yeah.
And we got some big problems as a humanity to solve. Cancer or poverty, or name the problem that's near and dear on your heart. Those problems aren't going to be solved by an individual. They're going to be solved by an organization. Yeah. Pick your organization. Pick your several organizations. Organizations are fundamentally people, right? Yeah. So if you are a church and you want to spread the gospel, those are people in an organization doing that work. If you're a teacher and you want to impact the next generation, that's teachers coming together in a classroom to do that important work. All of these things are fundamentally organizations made of messy people like you and me doing really important work.
Yep.
The reason it has to be applied is that if it's not applied, there's going to be no traction. We're going to keep drifting as a society, as a humanity, into less and less ideal environments for our families and for our communities. I'm a doer. At my core, I can talk about philosophy, I can talk about theoretical stuff. At the end of the day, one of my skill sets is doing. I want to get something done. I want to make a difference. I think we collectively here at Forte want to make a real difference.
Yeah, definitely.
And so we want to take mental fitness, and while that is an important category that we're creating and developing, we want to make that practical and applicable right now. There's lots of books, and there's lots of great webinars and lots of keynotes about ideas. But the reality is those ideas are not very good if they're not tangibly and tactically applied in the everyday life of normal humans like you and I. A human whose life is fundamentally changed because of the story they tell themselves and their endurance that they have, and a deeper, wider capacity and an increased flexibility to deal with the zigs and zags of life, is a very different human than the human who's drifting through life. And in my opinion, more and more people are drifting through life, which means that the organizations that they're a part of aren't going to be able to solve cancer, deal with poverty, deal with economic instability. Having fought in 2 wars, I want to avoid wars at all costs. But the way we do that are a bunch of people doing their jobs really well, both in Congress and in companies and in the military and diplomacy, etc. Those people need to have mental fitness, right? So that's why we do this. We do this because we don't want it to be just a theory. We want dads and moms and husbands and wives and teachers and pastors and educators and senators, all of these people increasing their mental fitness, because then they will show up differently in their sphere of influence. That's why we do it.
Yeah, it's amazing to me as I've been in this role and people ask what my business is, what we do. And when you start to explain it's a gym for the mind and it's proactive and it's not reactive, you start to attribute it to physical fitness and how we need to train ourselves the same way mentally. They're all like, yeah, totally, I get that. And like immediately get the idea. So why do you think it hasn't been done at scale before? Why do you think this is such a new concept?
Well, how much time do we have, John?
Yeah, right.
I think, look, what we're trying to do is tremendously difficult. Let's not skip over this, right? The system is designed to be reactive. It just is. And you could think about health insurance, and you could think about the mental health care in general. You could talk about how organizations spend their capital. There's lots of reasons why this is particularly difficult. Why hasn't it picked up? Maybe somebody looked at this and said, this is impossible to get done. Maybe that's one of the reasons. Maybe people haven't realized that actually we train so much for the physical world. Maybe it's because we understand that world the best, right? there's so much advice and resources and counsel around nutrition and sleep and physical fitness and all the things. We don't do that in the mental fitness space, and you have to ask yourself why. And the reality is that I can't think of a more important kind of domain to train under. Every decision that you and I and all of us make every single day is actually a reflection of our mental fitness. Do we work out or not? I went running this morning. I didn't want to. I did it anyway because despite the lack of comfort I was going to experience, I realized I know who I want to be and I know who I want to become, and consistency matters, right? So that was a mental fitness decision. Yeah. I was really tired last night. Maybe the older me would have been even more curt with my kids, but I knew that about myself that when I'm tired, I need more space. That's a mental fitness decision. How I show up as a father is fundamentally a reflection of my mental fitness capabilities. You talked about how we lead our meetings and how I really am trying to go out of my way to think about how every human at Forte is experiencing their job at Forte. And I know what they're experiencing at Forte isn't just confined to 9 to 5. They have families, they have health concerns, they have hopes and aspirations, they have older parents. I try to put myself in your seat. And why am I doing that? Because I want to lead you better, right? Mental fitness permeates every decision that we make. And we're lying to ourselves if we tell ourselves that it's not. So while we train ourselves physically, the number one thing that every organization, every individual, every member of our society is to train they have to train their mental fitness. And I'll just say really quickly, everybody, like physical fitness, has a certain level of mental fitness. Everyone. Whether you take it seriously or not. The guy who takes it not so seriously and the gal who takes it really seriously, the physical fitness space, they have levels of physical fitness. That same thing is true about mental fitness. Yeah. The only decision that you and I get to make is, are we going to be intentional about that and increase our mental fitness, or let the drift bring it down? That's the only question that we really have to ask ourselves.
You built this company in a unique way as a public benefit corporation, and not a lot of people choose to go that route. So what made you decide to make this a public benefit corporation?
Yeah. Well, when I left the Marines, it was over 10 years of service, and service is built into me now at this point. And as I thought about business schools to go into, my dream school was Stanford. And the reason I want to go to Stanford was their focus on social innovation, using the power of business for good. And I got the good fortune of going to that school and learning so much about how business could be deployed for significant societal impact. When we started Forte, we knew that we wanted to make sure that, one, we are making sure that we do this profitably for our customers, our employees, our coaches, the members, and our investors. We want to make sure that profit margins were healthy and all those things. But we also want to never lose sight of the societal impact, and public benefit corporations allow us to do that. And our public good is to help humans be more human. That's actually stated in our bylaws and something I got to report to as a CEO to our investors and our board. How do we actually do that? How do we measure that? All those things. And the reason we did that is because we never want to lose sight of why we're doing this. Now, we did start Forte before the age of AI became more mainstream. Yeah. I'm more convinced that helping humans be more human is what our public benefit requirement is now than when I started it. Because the reality is that everything is pulling away at the seams of what it means to be a human. And the public benefit corporation allows us to be able to still maximize shareholder value, but also as a CEO, be responsible and accountable to maximizing societal value. We want to do both, and we believe we can.
I think you hit on something there that I want to highlight. As a company, we are human first. And there's a lot of mental wellness apps out there and companies out there. And a lot of the time, the very first thing that happens when you sign into that app is it starts an AI bot chat with you and asks you specific questions and filters you into this thing. And what we lose with that is the reality that we are all different. We were all created different. We all have different things going on. And what we can do in a human first company is not just put you in a lump of like, okay, this person's struggling with this, but have a real conversation. And I think that's what highlights and separates Forte from maybe some competitors, if we want to call them that, is that we will be human first and we will have conversation and get to know you on a deeper level. I think that's really important what you said there.
Our Forte coaches are phenomenal. They're trained in mental fitness. But if we step back, the reality is there's nothing better for a human than another human.
Yep.
I love technology. Stanford is a technology-based school. Like, it's great. We use it everywhere. But there is nothing like two humans coming together to process something that matters to them. We just know that to be true. And so what's the most premium thing I can give someone is another human to process the moments that matter to them. And we've all experienced this even outside of Forte. Like, imagine calling a customer success number if you can find one. Well, you've got this fake bot, trying to navigate you through the right person, and it's really frustrating.
Yeah, it is.
Right? If that's frustrating to you when you're trying to get a refund or upgrade or do whatever you're trying to do with that CS motion, imagine when you're trying to process something that matters to you.
Yeah.
Why would you think that a chatbot that doesn't have feelings, that isn't finite like you and I, that doesn't have aging parents, that don't have young kids, that don't understand the hopes and fears that you and I both have as humans, how are they going to empathize with us?
Yeah.
How are they going to understand the risk and the return of the decisions that we have to make every single day? They can't.
Yep.
Right? So we are a human first company. And the reality is that humans helping other humans be more human is the most beautiful thing that I could have ever dreamed of. And it's really awesome that people all around the United States are signing up to be a Forte coach to add value to other people's lives because they've experienced it themselves. So I just want to say that I pinch myself every day when I think about our Forte coaches and who they are as humans and how they're coming alongside us to serve their fellow neighbor.
Well, we like to close with a rep that people can do as we finish up our episodes. But before we do that, do you have anything else that you want to say to our audience before we head into our rep?
You were not made here and created by accident. There's a reason why you're here. And the reality is the world needs you to be fully you. And that has to be intentional. And you are in the driver's seat, no matter what anybody and everybody else might tell you. And there's so much of you that is still not unlocked for all sorts of reasons.
Yeah.
Whether you do that with Forte or not is not the point. The point is be encouraged. There's more that you have, the more that you can become. And I know that true to be for me. I'm 41 years old now. My kids call me old. And I'm just starting to learn why I'm here.
Yeah.
And it's not a linear journey. So I want to encourage people wherever they might be in their journey, like, go be you. The world needs you. So that's what I would want everybody else to hear.
I love it. Thank you so much. All right. Today's rep is super simple. And Vineet, you can join in on this one too. So notice one moment today when you're reacting instead of responding. So it could be like losing your temper with your kids, which we've talked about, getting annoyed with a coworker, which I'm sure Vineet has with me already, feeling overwhelmed by your to-do list. There's things like that we all go through. Now think about that moment and then pause and take one breath. And then choose your response on purpose. Not just flippantly, but choose your response on purpose. Sometimes that's all you need, is to just take a breath and then realize what we talked about earlier. Why am I frustrated with my kids and why are they acting this way? So I encourage you today, that's your rep. Notice one moment today when you're reacting instead of responding, and then choose to pause, take a breath, and choose your response on purpose.
That's so good. That's great.
That's a rep. So we appreciate your time, Vineet, and we are so excited to continue to build this mental fitness company and change lives out there. And we appreciate you guys tuning in, and we'll see you next time.
Thanks.